Radio. It's NFL, or it's NFL Draft Week, I guess. Thursday of this week is the first round. We talked a little bit about our thoughts on the on this year's draft in the first segment. And this segment, we are happy to be joined by the NFL editor for Roto World and NBC Sports writer Evan Silva. Evan, how are you today?
Hey, what's up, guys?
Evan, welcome back.
Our guy, our resident draft and NFL fantasy guru, man.
It's almost like he's in the war room for the Redskins because he predicted so. You remember this, Evan? 2 years ago, you called it right here on the show. The wild card, Roy Halou, and what happens? Bam.
He even called his Achilles tear too, I bet.
No, I know, man. I love that they took him, and he had an excellent rookie year. I think he had 3 straight 100-yard games there at the end of the season.
Did.
And then the injury bug comes and bites him. But, hey, everything worked out for the best. I think Roy Halou will be back this year as their third down back. You remember as a rookie, he really progressed as a blitz protector, and he's excellent in the passing game, and it gives you that speed that Evan Royster couldn't last year.
Evan, I hope you're right, because we printed out a bunch of "You Had Me at Halou" shirts, and when we thought it was genius, and I think we printed them out, and then it was like 2 weeks later.
Oh yeah, 2 weeks later, it's just been sitting in my dresser.
He's just now
we had to buy them all back from the guy who printed them.
You know, people do forget about Halou though. I mean, him and Morris in that backfield is going to be nice this year.
Yeah, and what happens last year if Roy Halou stays healthy? And, it's easy to say, well, Alfred Morris would have beat him out. He's awesome. I wouldn't be so sure about that. I mean, Roy Halou is not a slouch when healthy. I mean, maybe this guy, is the second leading rusher in the NFL instead of Alfred Morris. It's funny how these things kind of work.
Sure.
Well, let's get into this year's draft. And actually, I want to start by asking Evan: Are you more excited for the NFL draft time of the year or for fantasy football?
I don't know, man. It's all exciting. I like these events. I love free agency. I love the draft. I love like when training camp is about to start. I love the first preseason game. I mean,
the whole thing.
Obsessed with all of it. So
nice.
I don't know. I don't know.
What is this year's draft theme? I know that's a vague question, but just give me a few thoughts on this year's draft and this year's draft class.
Well, I mean, everybody likes to talk about how all the quarterbacks stink, and which you guys probably don't care about too much because you guys have 2 good quarterbacks. I didn't really realize how deep this draft is until I tried to do a 2-round mock draft recently. And I had to leave a ton of guys out of the second round who, you might say, that's crazy. That guy's obviously going to be a second rounder. I had to leave him out because I couldn't fit him in. I mean, I think that it is a legitimately very, very deep draft, and even though the Redskins don't have a first-round pick, I think that they're going to get a couple of good players. And over these past few years, Bruce Allen and Mike Shanahan have shown an ability to, make later-round picks work. Obviously, Alfred Morris. We talked about Roy Halou, a 4th-rounder. They got Dijon Gomes in, I think, the 5th round.
Mm-hmm.
Aldrick Robinson has contributed. He was a 6th-round pick.
Niles Paul.
Niles Paul, the next Shannon Sharp. The Redskins.
Hey now.
No, Shanahan compared him, I think.
Oh, I know. I'm saying that not only to you, to Shanahan. Hey now.
Right. But no, I mean, they've done a great job of finding value, and I think that there's a lot of value to be had in this draft, certainly on that second day.
Now, you mentioned that the draft this year has a lot of depth. You got to be careful, or at least in my perspective, of saying it has a lot of depth. What type of depth are we talking? I mean, do you see a lot of Pro Bowlers coming out of this draft, or is it a lot of guys that can be starters in this league, but aren't necessarily going to become superstars? Where is the depth, the quality rank in there?
I just think that there are a lot of good football players. I think that there are a lot of good, even though, there's no Andrew Luck, there's no Robert Griffin, maybe there's not a Ryan Tannehill. There are a lot of second and third round, quality quarterbacks. I think that there are a ton of pass rushers that will get drafted, in the third and fourth rounds. I can't say they're going to be Pro Bowlers, but guys who are explosive pass rushers. I think of a guy like Jamie Collins. He played at Southern Miss, and I watched him the other day, and the guy is really, really explosive. I mean, he played on a horrible college team, but he was very productive. Nobody's talking about him. And he could be, a steal in the third or fourth round. He's an outside linebacker candidate in a 3-4. Another guy along the same lines, Quanterra Smith. He played at either Eastern or Western Kentucky, and I watched him the other day, and he gave DJ Fluker, he made DJ Fluker look silly on several occasions in their game against Alabama. And, that's a guy who's going to be available in the third or fourth round because this draft is so deep.
Evan, in what position do you think, talking about how deep this draft is there one position where this draft is really that deep? I've heard Kuiper say that he sees anywhere between 10 to 12 safeties that he think could be starters. I see 4 offensive, I've seen a couple drafts where they have as many as 4 offensive tackles going in the first round. In the first 15 picks. So is there one position overall where this draft is the deepest?
Yeah, and I don't think that the offensive tackles are particularly deep. I just think it's top-heavy almost. Beyond the top 3 guys, I don't think that you would look at any of the left tackles, at least, as being day one starters. I think safety is absolutely deep. I mentioned pass rusher. I like a lot of the tight ends. There might not be any running backs that go in the first round, so that looks like it could be a deep position because I think that there are a lot of quality, solid prospects at running backs who could be found in the later rounds, who could be starters in the NFL down the road. One guy that comes off the top of my head is Sierre Wood from Notre Dame. He was actually the number 2 back at Notre Dame last season behind Theo Riddick. But he's got an NFL running skill set. He's laterally explosive. He's got really good burst. He can play a little bit in the passing game. And I think that you can get him in the 5th or 6th round. And I think he has the chance to develop into a starter, by his 2nd or 3rd year.
Now, if I'm not mistaken, the Chiefs have made it clear that if they do stick with the first pick, they're going to take Jokel from Texas A&M.
Are you asking about Clowney?
No, I'm not. We'll get to that though.
Good.
But it seems like every year there are a couple teams that have an idea of who they'll take, but there's one team at the top that could just be the absolute wild card, and how they go is sort of a pinball effect down and changes the rest of the draft. Which team is that this year, do you think?
Well, I don't think that there is a wild card in the top 2. I think that Luke Jekyll is going to go to Kansas City. I think that Eric Fisher is going to go to Jacksonville. The Raiders are a little bit of a wild card. I think that they could end up selecting between Star Lotulelei, Sharif Floyd, and the 3rd tackle, Lane Johnson, was floated by Mike Mayock today. I don't think that they're going to take Lane Johnson because he's not a great run blocker, and he'd play right tackle in their offense, and they're trying to become a power-running offense this year to kind of suit Darren McFadden's running style, so I don't think that's a real consideration. But I don't think that anybody really knows what the Raiders are going to do at number 3. You see the Eagles seem like they really want to trade out. They've been connected over the past couple of days to Tavon Austin, Barkevius Mingo.
Please no.
And I don't think that those guys are serious candidates to go at number 4. I think that they want to trade down and get one of those guys.
If the Eagles get Tavon Austin, from my perspective, that frightens me out of this world.
As a Redskins fan, it has to.
Yeah, absolutely.
With that Chip Kelly offense.
Am I wrong for feeling that way?
No, but I love Tavon Austin. I did I think it was a 4-game tape study of him early in the off season, and I was really excited about him. I mean, he's the way that he accelerates with the football in his hand is, rare. There are maybe 4 or 5 players in the NFL that accelerate like that, that are as elusive as he is in the open field. But I get a little bit worried that that the hype on him is a little bit too much. I mean, I remember Dexter McCluster coming out of Ole Miss a few years back, and everybody loved him. I mean, Greg Cosell, smart people, and he has not been able to make it work because he's not a physical tackle breaker. He's not Percy Harvin. And Tavon Austin isn't a physical after-contact yardage player either.
And I Austin reminds me of Cobb, though. And if he turns out to be a Cobb, then that's pretty successful. I mean, Cobb is becoming a very important piece on that Packers offense.
If Vic turns into Aaron Rodgers, though.
Well,
absolutely.
That's a good point.
I think that if he turns into Randall Cobb, that's he becomes a very, very good football player. I don't know. I think that the hype on him has been that he's gonna, be an all-pro, be a guy who's just, who's like, I don't know. Everybody loves this guy so much, and I think it's a little bit over the top, a little bit.
So, Evan, when I brought up the Chiefs before, Bradley mentioned Clowney because we were talking before we came on about this possible or theoretical scenario, I should say. You know how in baseball, if you draft a guy but don't sign him, you get that same pick the following year. So kind of go with me here. If the Chiefs were to pass on the number 1 overall pick this year, or if they were able to pass on the number 1 overall pick this year, not take anybody, and promise themselves the number 1 pick next year, of course, assuming they would take Jadeveon Clowney. I mean, honestly, what do you think? Would that franchise do that?
No.
Okay.
What? No?
Didn't even entertain the idea of it.
All 3 of us were like, yep, absolutely,
down.
100%.
We're talking Clowney. I mean, he could be the next coming of, you name it, best defensive end out there.
Whatever, man. I mean, everybody thought that Jake Locker was going to be, the next Superman, Joe Montana. So let's just chill out a little bit, and the Chiefs are going to try to be competitive in 2013.
Fair enough.
Hey, Evan, I want to ask you about
Keep that in mind, though, when he rates Clowney next year. I'm going to be watching that very closely, Evan.
Can you talk a little bit? I'm probably to butcher his first name. I think is it Cordell Patterson, wide receiver at Tennessee.
Cordero, baby.
Yeah. So this guy has 1 year at Tennessee, spends 1 or 2 years playing JUCO ball. Now everything I read about him, people are raving about him. They said he might have some issues. I think one of his negatives was intelligence, which is never one.
That doesn't concern
Details.
teams. I mean, what's his name?
He had a better Wonderlic score than Tavon Austin, who's everybody's heartthrob.
There we go.
Did you take the Wonderlic, Evan? Because we all did here in this room. Have you taken it before?
Yeah, I took it once.
39 or more? 39 or higher? You don't have to answer that.
No, I didn't get a 39.
Okay, well, good. Kevin likes you. So, all right, keep.
So, can you just tell me a little bit about him? I was just the 1 year Tennessee. Now he's sneaking into top 20 in some drafts.
Yeah, I mean he's unbelievable. I mean, like go to my Twitter account and look at the highlight, not even the highlights, but like game cut-ups where you're watching not just the good plays but the bad plays as well. I mean, he is unbelievable in terms of his talent. I mean, he with the ball in his hands. I mean, I don't know that there's anybody in the NFL that's as good as that. I mean, he is like Mike Mayock described him as, his game tape as jaw dropping, and I mean, I can't even find the words to describe it. He's sick.
I saw his comparisons to Demaryius Thomas. Is that a fair comparison?
No.
All right.
Well, then what is?
I mean, I think you can. He doesn't that's not his game. His game is the ball in his hands. With Demaryius Thomas, he dominates defensive backs physically. And he can run by them. Cordero Patterson at this point is not it seems like he's not a confident route runner, and I wouldn't term him as like vertically explosive like Demaryius Thomas is. He needs to learn to run routes with more explosion, and he's just a guy who you put the ball in his hands and he's going to do special things. I don't think that Demaryius Thomas, I wouldn't characterize Demaryius Thomas as that kind of a guy, but Demaryius Thomas, you can kind of draw a similarity though, because Demaryius Thomas coming out of Georgia Tech was knocked as a guy who couldn't run routes. He only ran one route at Georgia Tech, and hey, he developed into a highly successful top 5 NFL wide receiver. Cordero Patterson is a guy who has been knocked as a guy who doesn't he doesn't run great pass patterns, and you can draw that little bit of similarity that maybe because Demaryius Thomas showed that he could improve in that area, Cordero Patterson can too.
Sure. So we are live here with senior NFL editor for Roto World, Evan Silva, as well as writer for NBC Sports. Evan, we're going to let you get out of here in a few minutes. Right. Some quick hitters to kind of wrap it up. I'm going to name a name. You tell me your best guess on where they go and to what team. Some of the bigger names that people are familiar with. Matt Barkley.
Bears, 2nd round.
Okay. The Honey Badger. Tyrann Mathieu.
We'll say Redskins, 3rd round.
Ooh, okay. Geno Smith.
Jaguars, number 33.
Interesting. Oh, so all the way down to number 33. Wow.
Yep.
Manti Te'o.
Vikings, 25.
Wow. Okay. And last but not least, the Washington Redskins that picked. Did I forget one, Kevin?
Keon Lattimore.
Who's that?
Marcus Lattimore.
Who's Keon Lattimore?
That's
Ray Lewis's brother, right?
Yeah.
I was waiting for
Ray
Evan.
Lewis's brother.
Yeah.
Right, yeah.
Well, he went to Maryland,
right?
So don't get on me too, man.
That's right.
Come on.
That's
Okay,
right.
I made a mistake. I'm sorry.
All right,
Marcus Lattimore.
First Marcus, then Keon.
I don't think Evan knows. Evan tweeted about that earlier. I don't think you have any idea what's going to happen with Marcus Lattimore, right?
No, I mean, I don't think. I think that if somebody was saying that they knew what would happen with Marcus Lattimore, they're just lying or they're delusional.
Right.
I mean, nobody knows.
A lot of lying and delusion on this show, though.
Fair. All right, Evan, last one. Redskins at pick 51. First, do we keep it? Secondly, if so, who do we take?
Yeah, I think that you guys will keep it. And I was going to mention a couple of guys who I think could be in the mix for that pick. Darius Slay, cornerback, Mississippi State. Teron Armstead, Arkansas Pine Bluff, offensive tackle. The one that would really, really intrigue me is Derek Rogers, Tennessee Tech wide receiver. This is a guy who has drawn comparisons among NFL scouts to Brandon Marshall. He has that kind of
Shanahan
talent.
guy, right?
He's got some off-field woes, and I think that there has been a little bit of chatter going around that the Redskins might use that 51st pick on a wide receiver.
I read that today.
Mike Shanahan, of course, drafted Brandon Marshall in Denver, and I think that he could give Derek Rogers a really long look. I think that if Derek Rogers had been at Tennessee and not kicked out last season, he would have been the best receiver on the team ahead of Cordero Patterson and Justin Hunter.
Interesting. Well, we're going to reference this tape come Friday when our pick comes around.
Derek Rogers and Tyrann Mathieu, I'll take that.
Hey,
give me that.
Absolutely.
Be nice.
So, Evan, we appreciate you.
You
coming on.
Fred Davis.
I just got a text that we have a whole variety of shows here on the Ball Hogs Radio Network, and it sounds like you're going to be joining our Ravens show in a couple weeks to recap their draft with the Purple Rain crew. So have fun with them. And enjoy the next 48, 72 hours. I know it's a busy time for you.
Absolutely, guys. Thanks for having me on.
Thanks for the time, Evan.
Evan Silva, Roto World, senior editor. A lot of great stuff. Whoa. In my
Can I read the strengths of
Be quick. Yeah,
of Patterson?
Be quick.
You love this guy. Why do you love this guy so much?
Strengths: explosive
Probably
speed,
the only guy he knows.
explosive speed, good size, leaping ability, big upside, red zone weapon, very fast, phenomenal run after the catch, quick twitch, quickness. So he's the best.
Sounds like any wide receiver.
So he's the best football player of
He's
all
the best
time.
human being
He
ever.
is. That actually reminds me of like
Tough to tackle in the open field, shifty runner.
us.
So he's literally the greatest football
Great
player
blocker.
ever.
Anyways, lot of interesting stuff.
That's good.
Honestly, I'm a little bit more excited about the draft after that interview than I was prior to it.
because
Yeah, and
of Tyrann Mathieu.
And Derek
Oh, that
Rogers.
doesn't really excite me. That scares
I always
me.
like this when it's a normal name but spelled differently. I'm pretty sure Derek Rogers is like DA''RRICK or something.
Yeah.
I'm telling you, I'd love this guy.
All right, fair enough. Coming up after the break, we got Ben Standig.
Is that weird?
Let's zone in on what the Redskins are going to
Yeah,
do
yeah.
right after the break. Ben Standig, Comcast Sportsnet. Back with you.